The Voyager Pact by Edwina Longbottom. Chapter 1. Echoes from the Edge. In the dim, quiet halls of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, it was another typical evening. Mission specialists, engineers, and astrophysicists worked diligently, hunched over glowing monitors, tracking faint signals and managing data from the spacecraft that roamed the dark expanse of space. The room had a stillness to it, punctuated only by the soft hum of machinery and the occasional murmur of voices, until the anomaly appeared. Dr. Sarah Kent leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing as she examined the sudden blip on her screen. A leading astrophysicist, who had devoted the better part of her life to monitoring the Voyager probes, she was intimately familiar with the silence that usually accompanied Voyager 2. Launched in 1977, the spacecraft had ventured into the unknown, passing planets and sending back invaluable data long after it was expected to go dark. But tonight was different. Sarah leaned closer, adjusting her glasses and squinting at the faint, almost imperceptible signal that had appeared, distinct against the steady background noise. She glanced at the time, 2:37 a.m. Few colleagues were still around, but the oddity demanded attention. With quick fingers, she summoned a nearby technician, Aaron Kim, who looked equally baffled by the data scrolling across the screen. "Dr. Kent, this can't be right," Aaron whispered, pulling a chair beside her. His face reflected a mixture of exhaustion and curiosity. "Is Voyager actually sending data? I thought it went quiet months ago." "It did," Sarah replied, her voice steady yet laced with intrigue. "But look, this isn't just residual data. It's images." The words felt surreal as they slipped from her mouth. Images? Voyager 2 was decades old, its systems worn by the harsh conditions of space. Yet here it was, breaking the silence with a steady trickle of information. Aaron clicked through the data, hands flying over the keyboard as he pulled up the newly arrived files. The screen filled with grainy, distorted images, each pixel a faint brushstroke of light against an ocean of darkness. "These can't be right," he muttered. But as the images loaded, a shape began to form. A large, unnatural structure against the stark surface of what could only be Pluto. Sarah's heart pounded as she watched the image come into focus. It was unmistakable. The object had structure, geometry, a deliberate design. She turned to Aaron, her voice barely a whisper. "Get the others." Within minutes, the room was abuzz. Experts, technicians, and analysts crowded around Sarah's terminal, eyes locked on the screen as Aaron magnified the images. The object was unlike anything they'd seen on Pluto, a planet once dismissed as a frozen, barren world. This could change everything," murmured Dr. Lyle MacArthur, a planetary geologist with graying hair and an ageless sense of wonder. Sarah nodded. "But we need confirmation. There's a risk this is an anomaly, maybe interference from space dust or degraded hardware." The room fell silent as the team continued their analysis, dissecting every pixel, every shadow. Yet the structure held its shape, a sprawling complex, faint but undeniably real, etched against Pluto's icy surface. The hours slipped by unnoticed as they worked, and by dawn, one thing had become clear. Voyager had captured images of something artificial on Pluto. Something they hadn't expected, something that had been hidden in plain sight, waiting for discovery. "Sarah, if this is what we think it is, there might be more," Lyle said, eyes bright with possibility. "We should attempt to reestablish a two-way communication. Voyager's old, but if we can get just a bit more data." A collective hush fell over the group as Sarah considered the proposition. Contacting a craft as old as Voyager 2 was risky and uncertain, but the thrill of discovery overpowered the risks. After all, they were scientists, explorers at heart, and this could be the most significant discovery of their lives. "All right," she said, finally breaking the silence. "Let's go all in. Prepare a directive for Voyager 2. We're asking it to send back everything it can." The team mobilized, each member assigned a task, every movement charged with excitement and urgency. Sarah's hands were steady as she typed out the message to Voyager, instructing it to capture as much data as possible, to dig into its reserves and reveal what lay beyond the thin veil of knowledge humanity had about Pluto. As she hit send, she glanced up at her team. "Now, we wait." The hours that followed were tense, each second stretching into eternity as the team watched the clock. When the first signals started trickling in, the room was silent. It took time to process the data, to piece together the images Voyager had sent, and as they did, a new reality emerged on the screen. More structures, even larger than the first, arranged in a grid-like pattern. Tubes or pathways connected them, resembling an advanced network. And amid the structures, barely discernible, were figures, small, angular, but unmistakably moving across the alien landscape. The team exchanged glances, each face reflecting a mix of awe, disbelief, and a hint of fear. These weren't random formations or geological oddities. They were artifacts, products of some form of intelligence. And there on the screen, evidence of life. Sarah took a deep breath, steadying herself. She knew that this moment would be recorded in history, the first undeniable proof of intelligent life beyond Earth, be captured not by a state-of-the-art probe, but by a craft older than most of the people in the room. Yet with the thrill of discovery came the sobering realization of their next step. If these beings existed, they had gone unnoticed, undisturbed. Why? Had they seen Voyager? And if they had, were they watching back? Sarah, Lyle's voice broke the silence. What do we do now? She met his gaze, her own excitement tempered by caution. We proceed carefully. This is a delicate situation, and we don't know what kind of civilization we're dealing with. For all we know, they might have been watching us longer than we've been watching them. With those words, a plan began to form. They would continue monitoring, observe without interference, and perhaps one day, if the time was right, they might reach out. As Sarah and her team prepared to take the next steps, the sun rose over NASA's control room, casting a warm glow over faces that had glimpsed the first evidence of life beyond Earth. The hidden frontier had been revealed, but the journey had only just begun. Chapter 2: Signals in the Silence. Days turned into nights in the NASA control room as the world outside spun on, oblivious to the monumental discovery unfolding in the quiet heart of mission control. After those first images from Voyager 2, the team worked tirelessly, examining every pixel, every shadow, hoping to understand the world and the beings hidden on Pluto. Dr. Sarah Kent sat at her desk, eyes darting between screens, her mind racing with questions. The data from Voyager was sparse and cryptic. Even though the images revealed structures and movement, there was so much more they needed to know. Were these Plutonians advanced? What was their energy source in such a cold, desolate place? And most pressing of all, why had they never attempted to reach out to humanity? As Sarah pondered these questions, Lyle MacArthur approached her desk, clutching a sheaf of papers. He looked both exhausted and exhilarated, like a man on the brink of a breakthrough. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you need to see this." She looked up, sensing the urgency in his voice. "What have you got?" "More data from Voyager. We think it's picking up signals, not just signals from the probe itself, but something else. It's almost as if Voyager is acting as a relay, capturing transmissions from Pluto." Sarah's pulse quickened. Signals? That could mean communication, maybe even attempts to reach Voyager. She leaned forward, studying the printed readouts. Patterns of data repeated, faint but structured. This looks intentional," she murmured, running her finger along the rows of numbers and symbols. "If this is real, it's some form of code, something they're sending, either as a response to Voyager or a message to us," Lyle finished. The weight of his words hung in the air, as though a bridge were forming between two worlds, tenuous and fragile. "We need a linguist," Sarah said. "Someone who can analyze this data and determine if it's a language or even something we can interpret." Within hours, they had reached out to Dr. Amira Bowen, a top linguist specializing in cryptography and extraterrestrial communication. Amira arrived at NASA's control room that afternoon, her presence sparking curiosity and whispers among the staff. She was known for her expertise in decoding complex languages and had previously consulted on deep space signals that had turned out to be nothing more than pulsars. But this was different, and she knew it. Amira wasted no time diving into the data, scanning the rows of symbols and numbers, her fingers flying over her laptop as she analyzed the patterns. "This isn't random noise," she said after a few minutes, her voice a mix of excitement and disbelief. "It's highly structured. There are patterns within patterns, almost like a recursive code." "But can you tell what it means?" Lyle asked, leaning in eagerly. "Not yet," Amira replied, her brow furrowed in concentration. But if I had to guess, they're repeating certain sequences deliberately, maybe as a way to establish a baseline, a starting point for translation. It's like they're saying, here's a common ground, let's communicate from here. The team held their breath as Amira continued to work, her focus unwavering. Hours passed, and as she pieced together fragments of the code, a rudimentary understanding began to emerge. It seems almost mathematical, she said, glancing up at Sarah and Lyle. There's a rhythm to it, like a sequence based on prime numbers and geometrical shapes. This might be their way of showing us fundamental concepts, counting, patterns, maybe even elements. Sarah felt a thrill at the prospect. So it's possible they're reaching out. But why now? Why did they wait until Voyager returned to their orbit? Maybe they were waiting for us to notice them first, Lyle suggested. If they're advanced enough to build these structures on Pluto, they might have known about us long before we knew about them. The room fell silent as each of them considered the implications. The Plutonians, whoever or whatever they were, seemed to be patient observers, waiting for the right moment to make their presence known. After a long silence, Amira looked up, her face serious. If this is a language, it's the most rudimentary form of it. But I think they're inviting us to respond. They're giving us the basics, patterns, shapes, sequences. They're inviting us to show them what we know. Then let's not keep them waiting, Sarah said, her voice steady with determination. If they're watching us, we need to send a reply. But carefully. The team worked through the night, crafting a response that would bridge the vast gap of understanding between humanity and the unknown beings on Pluto. They decided to use simple mathematical concepts, basic prime numbers, geometric shapes, and equations that reflected the universal constants of physics. Their hope was that, by demonstrating their knowledge of the universe, they could establish a shared language. At dawn, they transmitted their message through Voyager, instructing it to relay the sequence toward the strange structures on Pluto. As they sent the signal, an eerie stillness filled the control room, a quiet anticipation as they waited for a reply that could take hours, maybe even days. Days passed, and each hour felt like an eternity. The team took turns monitoring Voyager's feed, anxiously watching for any sign of a response. When it finally arrived, the signal was stronger, more defined. This time it was unmistakable, a series of images, grainy and pixelated, but undeniably deliberate. The first image was a simple representation of Pluto, followed by a sketch of what appeared to be a basic atomic structure, perhaps hydrogen, the building block of the universe. The next image showed what looked like the surface of Pluto, dotted with symbols and markings, possibly a map. And then came the most astonishing image of all. A crude outline of a figure, humanoid but distinctly different from anything on Earth. The head was elongated, the limbs shorter and more angular, but the shape was unmistakable. These beings were revealing themselves, sending an image of what they looked like. Sarah's heart raced as she took in the sight. These were not just creatures surviving in the cold. They were beings with intellect, self-awareness, and the ability to communicate. As the team gathered around the screen, examining each detail, they realized the significance of this moment. The Plutonians were not just signaling their presence. They were inviting dialogue, perhaps even friendship. "What do we do next?" Aaron asked, his voice trembling with excitement and fear. Sarah took a deep breath, steadying herself. "We respond, and we continue this exchange, carefully, respectfully. This isn't just about communication anymore. It's about building trust." They crafted their response, thanking the Plutonians for their message and sharing basic images of Earth, its shape, its position in the solar system, and a simple outline of a human figure. As they transmitted the message, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This was a conversation that would redefine humanity's place in the universe, a bridge between two worlds separated by unimaginable distance and time. And as they waited for the next reply, Sarah knew that their journey into the unknown had only just begun. They were standing on the edge of the hidden frontier, where discovery and danger intertwined, and where the future of two worlds lay in the balance. Chapter 3: The First Echoes. The hours that followed were some of the longest in Dr. Sarah Kent's life. The initial excitement of sending the message back to Pluto had left her with a sense of accomplishment, But now a tense silence filled the control room. Each member of the team waited with bated breath for what might be humanity's first conversation with an extraterrestrial species. The day wore on, and it wasn't until late into the night that a new transmission came in. The incoming data was faint, but it was unmistakable, another signal from Pluto. The room fell silent as Aaron adjusted the receiver, amplifying the signal until a familiar rhythm filled the air. It was the same structure as before, repeated sequences, but with subtle variations. And then, just as they had hoped, images began to appear on the screen. The first few images were similar to what they had received earlier, basic representations of Pluto and sketches of geometric shapes. But as the transmission continued, the images grew more complex, showing structures, intricate designs, and even glimpses of the being's environment. The clarity wasn't perfect, but the detail was enough to reveal a world unlike anything the team had ever seen. The next image stopped Sarah cold. There, in the faint outline, was something that resembled a sprawling crystalline city, with tall structures rising from Pluto's frozen surface. It seemed almost impossible. Pluto was supposed to be a barren wasteland, incapable of sustaining life, let alone a civilization. Yet there it was, shimmering in the black and white pixels on her screen, a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of these mysterious beings. Lyle gasped, leaning closer to examine the image. This is remarkable. They're not just surviving, they're thriving in ways we can't even imagine. Amira was quick to jump in. Look at the architecture. These structures are embedded into the surface, almost as if they're utilizing the natural landscape as part of their design. And the shapes, they're so geometric, so intentional. Sarah's mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle of these beings. They seemed to have mastered the art of living within the constraints of their environment, adapting in ways that humanity had only dreamed of. Her fingers trembled as she zoomed in on one of the images, focusing on the crystalline structures that seemed to be part of their cityscape. "They're using the ice, aren't they?" she said, a note of wonder in her voice. "They're integrating it into their architecture, possibly even their energy systems. Somehow, they've found a way to turn one of the harshest environments in the solar system into a home." The team exchanged looks, each of them feeling the magnitude of what they were witnessing. This was a civilization that had conquered Pluto's icy grip, transforming it into something sustainable, functional, and undeniably beautiful. Just then, a series of symbols appeared, arranged in patterns that immediately caught Amira's attention. "Wait," she said, her voice hushed with excitement. "These symbols, they look similar to Earth's periodic table elements. They're showing us something about their environment, maybe even their biology or energy sources." Lyle nodded, captivated by the display. It could be a way of demonstrating their scientific knowledge. They're speaking our language, or at least, they're trying to. The implications were profound. This wasn't just an alien civilization. They were scientists, explorers, perhaps even philosophers. They had observed Voyager, analyzed its technology, and were reaching out in a way that respected humanity's understanding of the universe. As the team pored over the images and symbols, they began to piece together a rough understanding of what the Plutonians were sharing. They used compounds that were rare on Earth but abundant on Pluto, elements that allowed them to thrive in the freezing temperatures, creating energy sources that relied on chemical reactions rather than sunlight. Sarah felt a profound sense of humility wash over her. Humanity had always imagined itself as the pinnacle of evolution, the most adaptable species in the universe. But here was a civilization that had adapted to a world entirely alien to anything on Earth, surviving without warmth, without oceans, without the lush landscapes that humans took for granted. "We have to respond," she said, turning to her team. "They're showing us so much about their world, their knowledge. We have to show them something about ours." The team spent the next few hours crafting a response, selecting images and symbols that could convey humanity's scientific achievements and understanding of the natural world. They chose images of Earth's periodic table, diagrams of DNA, and simple sketches of natural landscapes. Finally, they included a series of mathematical equations, hoping to establish a foundation of shared knowledge. Once they had assembled their message, Sarah took a deep breath and hit send. watching as the transmission made its way back to Voyager, and from there to Pluto. The hours passed slowly as they awaited a response, each team member taking turns resting in shifts. When the reply finally arrived, it was accompanied by a surge of adrenaline that wiped away their fatigue. The images that came through were unlike anything they had seen before. Gone were the simple shapes and structures. Instead, they saw images of what appeared to be gatherings of beings. The figures were humanoid but subtly different, with elongated limbs, angular features, and a texture to their skin that glinted like ice in the starlight. The beings were clustered together, their hands raised in what appeared to be a gesture of greeting or acknowledgement. Behind them stood the crystalline structures, shimmering in the faint light of the distant sun, their surfaces reflecting a quiet resilience. A silence fell over the control room as the team took in the image. It was as if the Plutonians were saying, "Here we are, we exist, and we welcome you." Sarah felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of awe and gratitude. This wasn't just a scientific exchange, it was a profound moment of connection, a bridge between two civilizations that had spent millennia separated by distance, silence, and the unknown. Amira's voice broke the silence, barely a whisper. "They're not just sending us images of their world, they're showing us their people, their culture. This is a gesture of friendship." Sarah nodded, her gaze still fixed on the screen. She knew that this was only the beginning of their journey, a journey that would push the boundaries of what humanity understood about life, existence, and the possibilities of the cosmos. As the team began drafting a response, Sarah felt a deep sense of purpose settle within her. This wasn't just about Voyager or Pluto or even humanity's place in the universe. It was about the courage to reach out, to listen, and to learn. And as she typed out her message, she felt a quiet certainty that somewhere out there, beyond the hidden frontier, there was someone listening. Chapter 4: The Language of the Unknown. The next day dawned, and the quiet hum of NASA's mission control returned to life, now charged with a new and solemn energy. Dr. Sarah Kent and her team were on the precipice of a conversation that was reshaping their very perception of existence. Each message from Pluto had been like a layer peeling back, exposing the rich complexity of a civilization long hidden in the shadows of space. Over the previous hours, Dr. Amira Bowen had continued decoding the incoming symbols and patterns with an intensity that bordered on obsession. She was certain now that these symbols represented a rudimentary language, one that, despite its alien nature, hinted at a shared understanding of science, logic, and perhaps even philosophy. As the team gathered around her workstation, Amira pointed to one of the screens. "Look at this," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "This series of symbols here, it's almost like a statement of existence, a way of saying, this is who we are, this is what we know." She paused, allowing the gravity of her words to sink in. "They're showing us their identity, bit by bit. Each transmission reveals more about them, about what they value, how they live, and possibly what they fear." Sarah studied the symbols, tracing the patterns with her eyes. In the lines and shapes, she could almost feel the cautious curiosity of the beings on Pluto. It was as though they, too, were grappling with the implications of this exchange, wary yet hopeful. "They're being careful," Sarah murmured. "Each message is deliberate, measured. They're testing us, seeing how much we understand and how we respond." Lyle, who had been silent for most of the morning, finally spoke up. "Maybe they're as afraid of us as we are of them. We can't ignore the fact that humanity has a history of conflict, of taking rather than sharing. They might see us as a potential threat." The words hit home, and the team exchanged uneasy glances. It was true. Humanity's history was marred with conquest and distrust, especially when encountering the unknown. How could they assure the Plutonians that this interaction would be different? Sarah leaned forward, resolute. "We have to be transparent with them, show them that our intentions are peaceful. This could be the start of something profound, something that could reshape both our worlds." She turned to Amira. "What can we send that will communicate our intentions clearly? Something that says we're here to learn and understand, not to dominate." Amira thought for a moment, her fingers tapping thoughtfully on the desk. "We could send images of our art, our symbols of peace, something that conveys unity and beauty. They've shown us their architecture and culture. Maybe it's time we showed them ours. The team spent the next few hours assembling a collection of images that represented humanity's greatest achievements in art, music, and culture. They selected images of the Sistine Chapel's ceiling, the pyramids of Giza, a simple sketch of a dove carrying an olive branch, and a melody, the notes of Beethoven's Ode to Joy, encoded in a way they hoped the Plutonians could interpret. When the collection was complete, Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what they were about to send. These images weren't just pieces of Earth. They were symbols of humanity's desire for connection, beauty, and peace. Once they transmitted the message, they settled in for what had become a familiar weight, each of them grappling with their own thoughts about the nature of the universe and humanity's place within it. Hours passed, and then finally, a new signal began to arrive, filling the control room with renewed anticipation. This time, the images were unlike anything they had seen before. The Plutonians had responded not with more structures or scientific data, but with something altogether unexpected: art. The screen filled with intricate patterns, swirling lines, and geometric shapes interwoven in ways that defied the team's understanding. The designs were mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, and they seemed to carry an emotional resonance that was impossible to ignore. It was as if the beings were sharing a piece of their soul, a glimpse into their essence. Amira's eyes widened as she studied the images. "This is incredible," she whispered. "These designs, they're more than just symbols. They're expressing something deeply personal, something almost spiritual." Sarah's heart pounded as she took in the beauty of the images. It was a side of the Plutonians they hadn't expected, a vulnerability that bridged the vast distance between their worlds. "Look at this one," Aaron said, pointing to a pattern that resembled a tree, its branches stretching out in delicate, crystalline tendrils. "It's like they're showing us their concept of growth, of life." The team marveled at the artwork, each image a masterpiece that transcended language and logic, speaking directly to the heart. In that moment, they felt an undeniable connection to these beings on Pluto, a connection built not on science or technology, but on a shared appreciation for beauty and expression. As they sat in silence, contemplating the images, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. She realized that, despite the vast differences between their worlds, there was something universal in the Plutonians' art, a longing for connection, a desire to reach out across the void. "They're not so different from us," she said softly. "They value creation, beauty, maybe even love. This isn't just a civilization we're communicating with. It's a people, a culture with its own values and dreams." The team nodded, each of them feeling the weight of her words. This discovery was more than just scientific data. It was an encounter with a kindred spirit, a glimpse into the heart of a civilization that had been hidden from view for eons. As they began to draft their next message, Sarah knew that they were no longer just scientists probing the mysteries of the cosmos. They were ambassadors, representatives of humanity, reaching out to bridge the gap between worlds. They decided to send a simple message in return: an image of the Milky Way with Earth highlighted, a gesture to say, "This is our home." They included a message in binary, expressing their desire to learn, to share, and to understand. Once the transmission was sent, they sat back, each of them lost in their own thoughts. The journey had taken an unexpected turn, leading them not just to the edge of the solar system, but to the edge of what it meant to be human. Sarah felt a quiet joy settle over her as she looked around at her team. They were part of something historic, something that transcended the boundaries of science and culture. And as they waited for the next reply, she knew that no matter what happened, they had already achieved something extraordinary. They had found a connection in the silence, a shared frontier that spanned the darkness between Earth and Pluto. And as they waited, that silence felt less like an emptiness and more like a promise of discovery, of understanding, and of a future where the mysteries of the universe were no longer hidden, but shared. Chapter 5: A Signal of Trust. The images of Plutonian art and symbols stayed on the screen long after the team had sent their reply. They lingered in the minds of everyone in mission control, a profound reminder that despite the alien origins, they were witnessing expressions of a shared need, perhaps even a shared soul. Humanity had never been so close to understanding another intelligence, and each passing hour brought them one step closer to a mutual revelation. As dawn broke over NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, Sarah Kent found herself alone, gazing at the final image the Plutonians had sent. It was an intricate, swirling design that seemed to pulse with life, as though each line and curve was breathing. She couldn't shake the feeling that this symbol was more than just art. It was a message, a representation of the Plutonian essence. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft footsteps of Amira, who joined her, coffee in hand, and offered her a tired smile. "Couldn't sleep?" Amira asked. Sarah shook her head, her eyes still fixed on the image. "I keep wondering what this symbol means. It feels alive somehow." Amira nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking the same thing. There's an intentionality in every line, every curve. It's as if they're trying to tell us something fundamental about themselves." The two women stood in silence for a moment, feeling the weight of the unknown. The previous exchanges had established a fragile rapport, but with each new message, the questions only grew. Who were these beings? How did they live? And most haunting of all, why had they waited until now to reveal themselves? A few hours later, a new signal came through, filling the control room with a palpable sense of anticipation. Everyone gathered around as the transmission loaded on the screen, each person holding their breath, waiting to see what the Plutonians had sent this time. As the images appeared, Sarah's heart raced. The Plutonians had sent something different, diagrams of what looked like machinery or technology, along with a sequence of symbols that Amira immediately recognized as mathematical equations. "These look like designs," Aaron murmured, studying the images closely. "But for what? Are they trying to show us their technology?" Amira squinted, focusing on the symbols that accompanied the diagrams. "It's more than that. These equations, they're a representation of energy conversion, maybe? This might be how they generate power." The realization hit them like a tidal wave. The Plutonians weren't just showing them art or culture, they were sharing science. They were opening a door into their technology, their understanding of physics, and perhaps even their survival. "This is huge," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with awe. "They're trusting us with their knowledge. They're showing us how they live, how they thrive in an environment we thought was inhospitable." Lyle's eyes sparkled with excitement. "This could revolutionize everything we know about energy. Imagine if we could understand how they harness power in such extreme conditions. It could change the course of humanity's energy consumption, maybe even solve our dependence on limited resources." The weight of this gift settled over the team like a warm mantle. The Plutonians had taken an extraordinary risk, sharing a piece of their survival with a species they had never met, whose intentions were still uncertain. This was a signal of trust, an invitation to collaborate, to learn from one another. Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly, analyzing the diagrams and equations. The symbols were complex, but with Amira's linguistic expertise and Lyle's knowledge of physics, they began to piece together a rough understanding of the Plutonians' technology. The equations suggested a form of energy conversion that relied on a combination of chemical reactions and crystalline structures, allowing them to harness the faint energy available on Pluto. It was a revelation that stunned them all. Humanity had long thought of Pluto as a dead world, a frozen wasteland with no potential for life. Yet here was proof that life had not only adapted to its harsh environment but had flourished, creating technology that could survive in conditions no human could endure. As they worked, the team crafted a message in return, carefully selecting images and diagrams that would convey their own scientific understanding. They chose to share basic information about solar energy, nuclear fusion, and Earth's reliance on organic fuels. It was a gesture of reciprocity, a way of saying, "This is what we know. We hope it will help you understand us, just as your knowledge has helped us understand you." Once the message was complete, Sarah hit send, feeling a sense of pride and unity with her team. They were no longer just a group of scientists, they were ambassadors of humanity, bridging the divide between two worlds through mutual respect and shared knowledge. The response came sooner than expected. This time, the Plutonians sent a series of images that appeared to be landscapes, crystalline structures, ice plains, and vast fields of what looked like frozen flora. The clarity of the images was breathtaking, each frame capturing the beauty and resilience of a world that had adapted in ways humanity could barely comprehend. And then came something that none of them had anticipated. The final image was an invitation, a rough diagram showing the path of a shuttle, the angles of approach, and landing coordinates on the Plutonian surface. It was a message that left no room for interpretation. The Plutonians wanted to meet. The team stared at the screen in stunned silence, the gravity of the invitation settling over them like a cold wind. "They want us to come," Lyle whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and fear. "They're inviting us to their world." Sarah felt a rush of emotions, excitement, trepidation, and a deep sense of responsibility. This was a moment that humanity had dreamed of for centuries, yet it came with risks and questions that no one could fully answer. Aaron broke the silence, his voice steady. "Do we have the technology to even consider this? Voyager is too old, and anything else would take years to reach them." Amira nodded, her face thoughtful. "But they know that. The Plutonians have likely been observing us for a long time. They understand our limitations. Maybe they have a way to help us get there." The team fell silent, each of them contemplating the implications. If the Plutonians had technology advanced enough to offer assistance, it could mean a new era of space exploration, a partnership that could redefine humanity's understanding of the cosmos. Sarah took a deep breath, her mind racing with possibilities. "We need to discuss this with the global space agencies. This isn't just a NASA project anymore. This is a mission for all of humanity." Over the following days, NASA reached out to agencies around the world, sharing the images, the equations, and the invitation. It didn't take long for governments, scientists, and diplomats to recognize the significance of the discovery. Plans were drawn up, potential missions were proposed, and an international coalition was formed to determine the best course of action. As Sarah watched the preparations unfold, she felt a sense of unity that she had never seen before. For once, the world was united not by politics or power, but by a shared desire to reach out, to explore, and to learn. It was a moment of global solidarity, a testament to the human spirit's enduring quest for knowledge. The invitation from Pluto had opened a door into the unknown, a door that humanity was now prepared to step through. And as the world held its breath, Sarah knew that whatever lay beyond that door, it would forever change the course of human history. The hidden frontier had revealed itself, and with it, the promise of a future defined not by borders, but by the boundless expanse of the universe. Chapter 6, Preparing for First Contact. The world was captivated. News of the Plutonian invitation spread across every corner of the globe, sparking discussions and debates that transcended borders, languages, and cultures. The mystery of what lay on Pluto, and the profound gesture of trust extended by an alien civilization, had united humanity in a way that no other discovery had before. Within days, NASA, alongside a coalition of the world's most advanced space agencies, began drawing up plans for an unprecedented mission, the first diplomatic voyage to another civilization. For Dr. Sarah Kent and her team, the days blurred into a flurry of planning sessions, meetings, and intense discussions about what would be required for such a journey. We're talking about building a craft specifically designed to traverse the outer solar system and land on Pluto, Aaron said during one of the initial meetings. "Not just a probe, but a craft capable of carrying human passengers. This is an entirely new frontier." "Absolutely," Lyle added. "It's not just about the technology. We'll need to consider environmental controls, survival gear, and ways to communicate on the Plutonians' terms." Sarah listened, her mind racing as she absorbed the magnitude of what they were planning. They were on the brink of creating a vessel that could make contact with an alien civilization, and every detail mattered. Each decision carried weight, a sense of purpose and care that extended beyond the typical parameters of space exploration. With her experience and leadership, Sarah was asked to head the planning committee, a role she accepted with humility and trepidation. The mission had grown far beyond what she had ever imagined, yet she couldn't turn away from the opportunity to help humanity take this monumental step forward. The first few weeks were spent addressing the technical requirements. A collaborative effort was initiated, with teams from NASA, the European Space Agency, ESA, Japan's JAXA, and Russia's Roscosmos all contributing their expertise. New propulsion systems were discussed, including the possibility of using nuclear fusion for a faster journey. Specialized shielding was developed to withstand Pluto's extreme temperatures, and advanced communication devices were designed to ensure seamless interactions with Earth during the mission. But it wasn't just technology that required careful consideration. There was also the question of who would go on this mission, a crew that would represent humanity to another world. Scientists, diplomats, engineers, and linguists were shortlisted, each selected for their skills and knowledge, but also for their capacity to approach the unknown with respect and humility. Amira was a natural choice. Her expertise in linguistics and her dedication to understanding the Plutonian language had proven invaluable, and her calm, open-minded approach made her a perfect candidate for a diplomatic role. Sarah, too, was nominated for the mission, her leadership in the initial stages of contact cementing her as a key figure in the upcoming journey. As the team took shape, excitement mingled with a sense of solemn duty. They were not only tasked with scientific discovery, but with fostering an interstellar relationship based on mutual trust and respect. Every team member understood that this mission was about more than themselves. It was a mission for humanity. One evening, as the team reviewed the Plutonians' past transmissions, Sarah felt a deep need to address one question that had been gnawing at her. Why had the Plutonians waited so long to make contact? Why now, after decades of Voyager's silence? During a break, she brought up the question with Amira, who had been studying the patterns in the Plutonians' transmissions. They had the technology to reach out long before Voyager, Sarah began, her voice quiet and contemplative. So why did they wait until we found them? What was stopping them? Amira nodded, considering the question. I've thought about that too. Maybe it wasn't so much about ability as it was about trust. They might have been watching us, assessing whether we were ready. Sarah sighed. But how could they have known? They're so far from us, their world's so different from ours. Maybe that's why, Amira replied thoughtfully. They might understand that we have limitations, boundaries, both technological and social. Perhaps they've been waiting for a moment when our curiosity and openness outweighed our fears. The idea resonated with Sarah. Humanity had a history of both exploration and conflict, a duality that had shaped their world in profound ways. But here, with the Plutonians, was an opportunity to embrace a new approach, to reach across the vast expanse of space and extend a hand of friendship rather than conquest. As the days passed, Sarah found herself reflecting on the immense responsibility they carried. This mission wasn't just about representing humanity. It was about demonstrating that humanity was capable of empathy, humility, and respect for other ways of life. The Plutonians had opened a door, but it was up to humanity to walk through it with grace. Finally, after months of preparation, the ship was ready. The vessel, christened the Unity, was a marvel of engineering and diplomacy, designed not only to carry its crew across the solar system, but to be a symbol of the collaborative spirit that had brought the world together. The day of the launch was a historic event. Crowds gathered around screens across the globe, watching as the crew boarded the Unity and prepared for their journey into the unknown. The atmosphere was charged with hope and anticipation, a shared understanding that this mission marked a turning point in human history. As Sarah took her seat on the Unity, she looked around at her fellow crew members, feeling a profound sense of pride and camaraderie. Each of them was here because they believed in something greater than themselves, a vision of a future where humanity was no longer isolated, but connected to a universe filled with mystery and possibility. The countdown began, and with a rumbling force that shook the Earth, the Unity launched, hurtling through the atmosphere and into the vast, star-filled void of space. The journey would take weeks, but every day would bring them closer to the mysterious world of Pluto, where an unknown civilization awaited. As they traveled, the crew familiarized themselves with the Plutonians' transmissions, practicing the gestures and symbols they would use in their initial greeting. Amira led the crew in understanding the basics of the Plutonian language, explaining the nuances of their visual communication and the importance of humility and respect. "Remember," she told them, "we are guests on their world. We're here to learn, to listen, and to honor the trust they've placed in us." Sarah felt a swell of gratitude for Amira's wisdom. She knew that this journey was about more than just discovery. It was a test of humanity's ability to meet the unknown with an open heart. As the Unity drew closer to Pluto, the crew received one final transmission from the Plutonians, a set of coordinates and a message of welcome. It was a simple, almost humble gesture, yet it carried a weight of significance that left the entire crew speechless. The moment had arrived. After decades of waiting, centuries of wondering, and countless years of looking up at the stars, humanity was about to make contact with another intelligent life form. As the Unity descended toward the icy surface of Pluto, Sarah gazed out the window, her heart pounding with a mix of awe and anticipation. The crystalline structures glimmered below, stretching out across the frozen plains like jewels scattered on a bed of snow. And there, and waiting near the landing site, stood a group of Plutonians, their figures small but unmistakable against the stark landscape. The ship touched down, and a hush fell over the crew as they prepared for their first steps onto Pluto's surface. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. She knew that this moment would be remembered for generations, a symbol of humanity's capacity for connection, understanding, and hope. With careful steps, she led the crew out of the Unity, feeling the crisp chill of Pluto's atmosphere as they approached the waiting Plutonians. The beings stood in a semicircle, their angular forms shimmering in the faint sunlight. Their elongated limbs and crystalline skin were unlike anything Sarah had ever seen, yet there was an unmistakable warmth in their posture, a quiet dignity that spoke of wisdom and strength. Amira stepped forward, raising her hands in the gesture they had practiced, a sign of greeting, respect, and peace. The Plutonians responded in kind, mirroring the gesture with grace and ease. In that moment, the vast distances of space, the barriers of culture and language, and the boundaries of fear and isolation all fell away. They were no longer two civilizations separated by an endless frontier. They were beings united by a shared desire for understanding, a mutual respect that transcended the limits of their worlds. As Sarah looked into the eyes of the Plutonians standing before her, she felt a profound sense of peace. This was the hidden frontier, the place where humanity's journey had led them, not to conquest or domination, but to a quiet, humble meeting of minds and hearts. The first words were spoken, and a new chapter of history began, one defined not by isolation, but by the boundless possibility of friendship among the stars. Chapter 7: The Meeting of Minds. The icy plains of Pluto stretched into the horizon, the landscape bathed in an eerie glow from the distant sun. The silence was profound, as if the planet itself were holding its breath, bearing witness to the historic encounter unfolding on its surface. Dr. Sarah Kent and her team stood face to face with the Plutonians, separated by worlds, but united by a single, unspoken desire for understanding. Sarah took a tentative step forward, feeling the weight of every human dream, every ancient tale of meeting beings from beyond the stars, settling on her shoulders. The Plutonian nearest to her mirrored her movement, its limbs elongating gracefully, shimmering in the faint light. Its form was angular, almost crystalline, and its skin seemed to capture and reflect light, creating an effect that was both otherworldly and beautiful. Amira, standing beside Sarah, raised her hands in the gesture they had practiced, signaling peace and respect. The Plutonian responded in kind, its delicate limbs forming an intricate pattern that conveyed understanding and acknowledgement. It was a silent exchange, but it spoke volumes. As the first moments of mutual greeting passed, Sarah sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The Plutonians moved closer, forming a semicircle around the human team. Sarah's heartbeat quickened as she felt a faint tremor beneath her feet, an intentional pulse, almost like a low-frequency hum, that seemed to resonate through the ground and into her body. "It's a form of communication," Amira whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "They're using the planet itself as a medium. This resonance, it's their way of speaking." Sarah felt a thrill of awe at the realization. The Plutonians had found a way to use Pluto's unique environment to transmit messages, creating a language of vibrations and pulses that transcended verbal speech. It was a language of feeling and sensation, one that required openness and sensitivity to fully comprehend. Amira closed her eyes, attuning herself to the vibrations, trying to interpret the rhythms and patterns that flowed through the ground. After a moment, she opened her eyes, her face filled with a quiet reverence. "They're welcoming us," she said softly. "They're expressing gratitude and curiosity. They want to understand us as much as we want to understand them." With Amira's guidance, the human team responded, each member pressing their hands to the ground, feeling the vibrations, attuning themselves to the Plutonian rhythm. It was a humbling experience, to communicate not through words or gestures, but through the very pulse of the planet itself. As the exchange continued, Sarah sensed a deep wisdom in the Plutonians, a sense of patience and resilience that spoke of a civilization forged in the crucible of Pluto's harsh environment. They had adapted to a world of extreme cold and darkness, finding beauty and meaning in the challenges they faced. Their lives were shaped by an understanding of balance, of living in harmony with their surroundings, rather than bending them to their will. The Plutonians began to share images with the humans, transmitted through crystalline devices they carried. The images were projected into the air, each one a glimpse into their world, a society that valued knowledge, harmony, and preservation. Sarah saw vast networks of crystalline cities, energy fields powered by the planet's natural elements, and gatherings of Plutonians in serene, contemplative poses. One image in particular struck her. It was a depiction of their history, a journey that mirrored humanity's own struggles and triumphs. The Plutonians had faced challenges, periods of scarcity and adversity, yet they had survived by fostering unity, by working together to harness the limited resources of their frozen world. They had chosen cooperation over conflict, resilience over dominance. "They've built their civilization on principles of harmony and conservation," Lyle murmured, awestruck. "They've learned to thrive in an environment that would be hostile to us, using every resource carefully, respecting the balance of their world." Sarah felt a pang of humility as she took in the image. Here was a species that had found a way to exist in one of the most extreme environments imaginable, not by conquering it, but by adapting to it. Their civilization was a testament to the power of resilience and the wisdom of living in harmony with nature, a lesson that resonated deeply with her and her team. The humans shared images in return, depicting Earth's landscapes, cities, and cultures. They showed forests, mountains, oceans, and the diversity of life that flourished on their planet. The Plutonians watched the projections with a quiet fascination, their crystalline forms seeming to shimmer with a deeper light as they absorbed the images of Earth. Amira carefully narrated each image, explaining humanity's history and the diversity of cultures, the triumphs and struggles that had shaped their world. She described humanity's scientific achievements, their quest for knowledge, and their desire to understand the universe. But she did not shy away from the darker aspects of their history, the conflicts, the environmental challenges, the mistakes that had left scars on their world. The Plutonians listened with patience, their silence carrying a depth of understanding that Sarah could feel in her bones. They too had faced challenges, had learned from their own mistakes. There was no judgment in their gaze, only a profound empathy, a recognition of the shared journey that both species had undertaken. Finally, the Plutonians shared one last image, a scene that filled Sarah with a sense of wonder and gratitude. It was an image of the Voyager 2 probe, captured as it had passed by Pluto all those years ago. The Plutonians had seen it, had recognized it as a creation of intelligence, and had watched it continue on its journey through the cosmos. "They knew of us long before we knew of them," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "They watched us, perhaps waiting for a sign that we were ready." Amira nodded, her eyes glistening. "And now they've reached out, extending their hand to us, inviting us to share in their knowledge, their wisdom. This is more than we could have ever hoped for." In that moment, Sarah felt a profound sense of connection, not just to the Plutonians, but to the entire human race. They had crossed a threshold, venturing beyond the boundaries of Earth to find not enemies or conquerors, but fellow travelers, beings who had journeyed through their own challenges, their own triumphs and losses. As the exchange of images concluded, Sarah took a step forward, her hand extended in a gesture that was both ancient and timeless. The nearest Plutonian responded, raising its crystalline limb to meet her hand in a gentle, tentative touch. It was a gesture of solidarity, a quiet acknowledgement of the journey they had both taken to reach this point. A message resonated through the ground, a simple rhythmic pattern that Amira translated aloud. They are saying that this is the beginning, that they wish to share knowledge, to learn from us, to build a relationship based on trust and respect. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she heard the words. This was the dream that humanity had carried for centuries, the dream of finding others in the cosmos, not to conquer or fear, but to connect, to understand, to grow. In response, Sarah and her team tapped their hands against the ground, echoing the Plutonian rhythm with a message of their own. We come with open hearts, with respect and gratitude. We are here to learn, to listen, and to honor the path you have shown us. As the resonance faded, a quiet settled over the gathering. Sarah felt a profound peace, a sense of fulfillment that filled every corner of her being. This was what humanity had been searching for, a bridge to another world, a connection that transcended words and borders. The Plutonians moved back, their forms shimmering in the faint light, their gestures a silent promise of future encounters. They began to recede into the distance, returning to their crystalline cities, leaving the human team standing in quiet awe on the frozen plains. As Sarah watched them disappear over the horizon, she knew that this was only the beginning of a new journey, a journey that would span not only space but time, a journey of shared discovery, mutual respect, and the boundless potential of friendship. And as the team returned to the Unity, their hearts filled with gratitude and hope, Sarah felt the quiet certainty that humanity's place in the universe had shifted. They were no longer alone in the vast cosmos, no longer isolated by the boundaries of their world. They had found allies, friends, and perhaps in time, even family among the stars. Chapter 8. A Path Forward. The journey back to the Unity was filled with quiet contemplation. The human team moved slowly across Pluto's icy plains, their minds reeling from the encounter that had just taken place. Each step felt as if it carried the weight of generations, the dreams of countless people who had looked to the stars and wondered if humanity was alone. Dr. Sarah Kent walked in silence, replaying the final moments of their meeting with the Plutonians. Their crystalline forms had faded into the distance, but the resonance of their shared communications still lingered in her mind, a sensation of warmth and trust that defied the cold emptiness of space. As the team reached the Unity and prepared to board, Amira placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder, breaking her from her thoughts. "You know," Amira said softly, "I think this is only the beginning. We've opened a door that can never be closed." Sarah nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for Amira's words. The Plutonians' invitation, their willingness to share knowledge and offer friendship, had indeed marked a turning point not just for their mission, but for all of humanity. They had made contact with a civilization that had chosen peace over conflict, resilience over conquest, a path that humans had often struggled to follow. As they boarded the Unity and settled into their seats, the crew prepared for the return journey, each member lost in their own thoughts. The ship's engines roared to life, and with a gentle ascent, they left the surface of Pluto, watching as the mysterious world slowly shrank below them. It was a bittersweet moment, a farewell tinged with the promise of future encounters. During the quiet days that followed, the crew shared stories, reflections, and ideas. They pored over the data and images they had gathered, piecing together a picture of the Plutonians' world, their culture, and their profound understanding of existence. Sarah spent long hours with Lyle, Amira, and Aaron, discussing what they had learned and speculating on the possibilities that lay ahead. One evening, as they neared the halfway point of their journey back to Earth, the team gathered in the central cabin to review the images from their encounter. Amira projected a series of images onto the screen: Pluto's crystalline structures, the Plutonians' elegant symbols, and the landscapes of their frozen world. Lyle spoke first, his voice thoughtful. "The Plutonians' approach to energy and preservation is remarkable. They've mastered a way of life that harmonizes with their environment, using resources sparingly, never taking more than they need. Imagine if humanity could adopt even a fraction of that philosophy. Amira nodded. It's more than just technology, it's a mindset, a commitment to balance. They see themselves as part of their world, not separate from it. That's something we could learn from. Sarah felt a surge of determination as she listened to her team. They had been given a rare gift, a glimpse into a civilization that had survived and thrived against unimaginable odds, guided by principles of unity and respect for their world. It was a model that could inspire humanity to reimagine its own relationship with Earth, to find new ways of living that honored the balance of nature. As the discussion continued, Aaron leaned forward, his eyes bright with excitement. We can't keep this to ourselves. When we return, we need to share everything we've learned with the world. People need to know that there's another way, a better way. This could change everything. Sarah smiled, feeling a swell of pride for her team. They had been through so much together, had faced the unknown with that courage and curiosity. And now, as they prepared to bring their findings back to Earth, she knew that their journey would have far-reaching consequences. The remaining days of the journey passed in a blur of activity. The team compiled reports, organized data, and prepared presentations, each member fully aware of the importance of their mission. They knew that their return would be met with questions, skepticism, and perhaps even resistance, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Finally, after weeks of travel, the Unity approached Earth, its sleek hull gliding through the planet's atmosphere as it descended toward the landing site. Crowds gathered below, their eyes fixed on the sky as they awaited the return of the first humans to make contact with an extraterrestrial civilization. As the ship touched down, a hush fell over the crowd, followed by an eruption of cheers and applause. The world was watching, and Sarah felt the weight of that collective gaze as she prepared to step out of the ship and share their story with humanity. The press conference that followed was held in a vast hall filled with scientists, diplomats, journalists, and leaders from around the world. Sarah stood at the podium, flanked by her team, feeling a mixture of nerves and excitement. This was the moment they had been preparing for, the moment when they would reveal the truth of what lay beyond the hidden frontier. She began with a summary of the mission, explaining how they had tracked Voyager's transmissions to Pluto, how they had discovered the Plutonian civilization, and how they had made first contact. The room was silent as she spoke, each person hanging on her every word, captivated by the tale of a world so different yet so similar. When she reached the part about the Plutonians' way of life, their harmony with their environment, their philosophy of balance, Sarah saw a shift in the audience's expressions. People leaned forward, their eyes widening with a mixture of awe and reflection. She could see the impact of her words, the way they resonated with a world grappling with its own challenges of sustainability and coexistence. Amira spoke next, sharing the intricacies of the Plutonians' language and their methods of communication. She described the rhythmic pulses, the gestures, the symbols that conveyed meaning without words. She spoke of the Plutonians' art, their crystalline cities, and the wisdom they had accumulated through centuries of adapting to their harsh world. As the press conference continued, the human team answered questions, shared images, and conveyed the lessons they had learned from their interstellar neighbors. They spoke of the Plutonians' invitation, their openness, and their desire for a relationship based on respect and mutual learning. By the time the conference ended, Sarah could feel a shift in the room, a sense of hope and possibility that hadn't been there before. The story of the Plutonians had touched something deep within each listener, igniting a spark of inspiration and unity. In the days that followed, Sarah and her team traveled the world, sharing their findings, meeting with scientists, environmentalists, and leaders. The Plutonians' message of harmony and balance began to spread, resonating with people from all walks of life. Initiatives were launched to address climate change, conservation efforts were renewed, and a global movement emerged, one inspired by the idea that humanity could create a future built on respect, resilience, and unity. Sarah found herself at the forefront of this movement, working tirelessly to foster a new understanding of humanity's place in the universe. The Plutonians had given them a gift, a vision of what was possible, and it was up to humanity to honor that gift by creating a world that reflected the values they had learned. Years passed, and as Sarah watched the changes taking shape across the globe, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey to Pluto had been a leap into the unknown, a voyage that had challenged and transformed them. And in the end, it had brought them not only knowledge, but a new way of seeing themselves and their world. One quiet evening, as she sat on her porch, gazing up at the stars, Sarah felt a familiar sense of wonder. She knew that somewhere, out beyond the frozen plains of Pluto, the Plutonians were watching, perhaps even hoping that humanity would live up to the promise of that first encounter. The hidden frontier had been crossed, and humanity had been forever changed. And as Sarah looked up at the night sky, she knew that this was only the beginning. A new chapter in the story of two civilizations, united by the boundless possibilities of friendship among the stars.